Good morning, boys and girls. Welcome back. We're so glad you're here. It has been a great holiday season, and we are looking forward to jumping right back into 2 Samuel. I had to go all the way back to November 6th to try to figure out where we left off in the life of David. So we are in 2 Samuel. Chapter 2 is where our lesson is going to start today, but by way of review, the end of 1 Samuel, first chapter of 2 Samuel as well, we hit the story of the death of Saul and Jonathan. They went to battle and they both died there. Saul actually killed himself, fell on his sword because he didn't want the enemy to overtake him. He had been injured and he didn't want the enemy to torture him. So he actually fell on his own sword, and Peter's having some fun with the sword that we found. So Saul and Jonathan have passed away. So we know that David was supposed to be the next king, but it isn't quite as smooth as just crowning him the next king. Right, he would get a scepter, but a few things stand in the way. So if we look at 2 Samuel chapter 2, verse 1, it says, "And it came to pass after this that David inquired of the Lord." What does inquired mean, boys and girls? Yeah, he prayed, he asked, he talked to God, and he asked the Lord, saying, "Shall I go up with any of the cities of Judah?" And the Lord said unto him, "Go up." And David said, "Whither shall I go up?" And he said, "Unto Hebron." So he asked the Lord, he's like, okay, is it time for me to be king? Should I go to Judah? Should I be anointed king? And God tells him, you should go to Hebron. Okay, so verses 2 and 3 tell us that he gets his family together. He gets his men and his men's families, and they travel up to Hebron, and they are there. Verse number 4, "And the men of Judah came, and there they anointed David king over the house of Judah. And they told David, saying that the men of Jabesh Gilead were they that buried Saul." So he goes up to Hebron, as God says. He gets anointed king over Judah, but not over Israel. We're going to find out what happens with Israel in just a moment. But that last part of that verse says that they told him where Saul was buried. And David is thankful to find this information out. He writes to the people of Jabesh Gilead, thanks them for taking care of the Lord's anointed, for taking care of Saul. Well, I said we would get to Israel. So David is reigning in Hebron over Judah. But we have Israel. Okay, in charge of Saul's army was a man named Abner. Abner was in charge of the army. He was the captain. And he goes when he finds out that Saul and Jonathan are dead, and he finds Ishbosheth. And Ishbosheth is another one of Saul's sons, and he makes him the king over Israel. And this can be found in verses 8 and 9. "But Abner, the son of Ner, captain of Saul's host, took Ishbosheth, the son of Saul, and brought him over Mahanaim, and made him king over Gilead, and over the Asherites, and over Jezreel, and over Ephraim, and over Benjamin, and over all Israel." So you have David ruling over Judah, and now you have Ishbosheth, one of Saul's sons, ruling over Israel. Now, boys and girls, was that God's plan? Have we heard about this Ishbosheth? No. Did God say that Ishbosheth would be king next? No, he didn't. He told Saul that the kingdom would be taken from his family. So this was not part of God's plan to have Ishbosheth be the king or to rule. The Bible tells us in verse 10, Ishbosheth, Saul's son, was 40 years old when he began to reign over Israel, and reigned 2 years. But the house of Judah followed David. So for 2 years, Ishbosheth is reigning over Israel. Now, during that time, David reigns in Hebron. The Bible tells us he did that for 7 years and 6 months. But Joab and Abner were both men of war. They were men of battle. Joab is over David's men, and Abner is over Ishbosheth's men, or Saul's men. He had been the captain under Saul. And they are going back and forth, boys and girls. They both of them thought that their person should be king, that David should be king, that Ishbosheth should be king, and they go back and forth. And there's a lot of battling and a lot of war that takes place between the two of them. At the end of chapter 2, it says, we'll start in verse 30. And Joab returned from following Abner, and when he had gathered all the people together, there lacked of David's servants 19 men and a Asahel. So 19 of David's men die as they're going back and forth. And then at the last part there, it named a man. That man was actually Joab's brother. And Joab's brother had gone after Abner. He was going to go after, and Abner had killed him. Well, Joab gets very upset about this. Joab is very upset that Abner has killed his brother. And we're going to find out more next week about how, or actually, a little bit later today. Sorry, I was thinking that was next week's lesson, but it's in chapter 3 today. How Abner killing Joab's brother had enraged Joab. Joab was so upset that Abner would kill his brother, and he couldn't see through that. He couldn't get past that. Verse number 31, but the servants of David had smitten of Benjamin and of Abner's men, so that 360 men died. So, and they're going back and forth, but 300 would be 60. So 360 of Abner's men have died, and then 20 of Joab's men have died. And they finally agree at least for this small amount of time, that they're going to pause the fighting. Because of all the deaths, they decide that, they're going to make a peace treaty for the time being. Well, as I said, going into chapter 3, Joab is so upset. We're going to jump just to the end of it, boys and girls. Verse number 27, and when Abner was returned to Hebron, Joab took him aside in the gate to speak with him quietly. And actually, before I go on and finish this verse, before it gives away the punchline, David had actually called Abner in. David had met with Abner, and he had said, let's be peaceable. David was not about going to war in order to get his kingdom. He didn't want to see any more of his people die. He didn't want to see any Israelites die. He wasn't about battle, so he had made peace with Abner. And he turns Abner away peaceably. He says, go back. We're going to handle this peaceably. And Joab returns. He finds out that Abner's been there, and he is upset with David. He's like, wait, what? Abner was here? Yeah, exactly. You made peace with Abner? How could you make peace with Abner? And Joab is so upset, and David is clear with him. We're going to be peaceable. I sent him out peaceably. Well, Joab's not content with that. And that's where this verse picks up. And it says, he pulls him aside. He's like, let me talk to you. I want to talk to you quietly. And he smote him there under the 5th rib, that he died for the blood of Asahel, his brother. So, Peter here's being funny. My 5th rib's a little lower than that, Peter. But anyways, so Abner's so upset at the fact, Joab is so upset that Abner has killed his brother that he takes Abner's life as well. What do you think, boys and girls? Is David going to be happy that Abner's been killed? No, of course not. And David goes on to say, this is not on me. This blood is not on me. This blood is on Joab and Joab's family for what he's done. Verse 39, and I am this day weak, though anointed king. This is David talking. And these men, the sons of Zeruiah, be too hard for me. The Lord shall reward the doer of evil according to his wickedness. So wrapping up chapter 3, David says, Joab, you've done wrong. But you know what? I'm going to let God take care of it. I'm not going to take things into my own hands. I'm not going to do it on my own timing. I'm going to let God reward your wickedness, and not reward in a good sense. I'm going to let God take care of it. Boys and girls, how often do we seek revenge? And maybe it's not physically, maybe it's with our words. Some of us can be very cutting with our words and tear people down. How often, and maybe not physically with a sword, but our words sure can cut. How often do we take revenge or take things into our own hands when we should really seek God and let God take care of it? And then we started this lesson with the fact that David sought God. David inquired of the Lord. David sought wisdom from the Lord. Boys and girls, I hope this week 2 things. 1, when you're ready to take revenge, when somebody hurts you, when somebody does something you don't like, that you'll leave that up to God. And number 2, that you will seek God. That you will seek him for your decisions, what's best, what you should do, that you should follow him. Take time to pray and ask God what's best.